thanks for the
Yes,
invitation.
thank you for this kind invitation and for the possibility to be here and to present you our insights into the topic related to avant-garde and how we can think about reading avant-garde, how we can think about analyzing avant-garde, and how we can think about writing also about avant-garde. And yes, and we will start with this picture, which is not avant-garde per se, but Alfred Jarry, who you know as a writer and playwright, he is said to have commented on his play Le Bourgeois. This is taking place in Poland, which means nowhere. It was set 1896, and we can actually try to paraphrase this sentence and this comment and to say in East, it is taking place in East, which means nowhere. And this concept of East is our starting point into our talk, into our presentation, because we'd like to focus within our presentation on the issue how we can understand East in the context of analyzing avant-garde, how we can understand the concept of East in research on avant-garde, what consequences and what implications it has regarding avant-garde, and what barriers or what borders it refers to, how we can distinguish East from non-East, East from everything else which is not East, obviously. And instead of an approach which is focused on a one-way flow from center to periphery, instead of an approach which might be seen as something more hierarchical, we would like to present or imagine this history of avant-garde as a moved, shifting map or constellation, where you don't have any clear directions. You have vectors aligned in different directions, which are not based on the principle of subordination and dependency. In our presentation, we will try to introduce this kind of perspective in order to encourage thinking within art history, but also abroad, about the avant-garde from this other way of analyzing and imagining avant-garde. And we would like to focus particularly on collaboration between artists, mutual exchange between artists, and also movements in plural, of objects, people, things, but also images, which is also very important in our opinion for thinking and researching on the topic. We will present a few case studies, mostly from Belarus, from Poland, and from Ukraine. So that's the plan for tonight. As Jean-Louis Cohen stated, a history of modern architecture cannot be understood solely as a history of its aesthetical influences. And this statement, in my opinion, is valid not only for architecture, it can be also applied for thinking about art. So it's not about thinking in terms of influences as something which consists of, on one hand, central dominant position, and on the other hand, a culture, a group, which is more understood as a recipient, as a passive actor in this constellation. And instead of this, I would like to give this priority or focus to narratives which are centered around connections, about interconnections, about movements, about exchange crossing, but also moments of disruptors and moments of breaks, where the narrative is not linear anymore, and we have some moments where something changes and goes in totally different direction. Yes, before I present you some few selected case studies from interwar period, let's go back to the future. So let's go back to 70s, early 70s, let's go back to very interesting, in my opinion, work, very interesting for the context and topic of today's presentation, work by Andrzej Kostołowski and Jarosław Kozłowski, two Polish artists, conceptual artists, avant-garde artists, who published, in 1972, published a work called Net. It was a page with this blue header net, with containing a 9-point statement, and it was conceived as a trigger to enable exchange and to enable contacts beyond geopolitical borders, but also beyond political systems, both socialist system but also capitalist system. And Jarosław Kozłowski and Kostołowski, so Jarosław Kozłowski, recollecting this moment of conceiving and establishing this work, he commented, Kostołowski and I met very frequently and talked about art, I can read here. Talked about art a lot, swapped books, and so on. The idea of ignoring all the physical barriers and borders which limited contacts was born in a very natural way, as was the idea of using the post to get in contact with various artists around the world. So it was a work which was mailed, it was sent by post initially to more than 350 artists from so-called West and East. Then it started to have its own life. So the artists started to get this ball rolling. So they started to develop this project on their own and started to be part of this community, but also to expand the community of artists. In the statement, Kozłowski and Kostołowski, they remarked that a net is open and uncommercial. And points of the net are private homes, studios, and any other places where art propositions are articulated. These propositions are presented to persons interested in them. Propositions may be accompanied by editions in form of prints, tapes, slides, photographs, books, films, handbills, letters, manuscripts, etc. Net has no central point and any coordination. Points of the net can be anywhere. All points of the net are in contact among. Oh, it's raining. I promise Anna that it won't rain today. All points of the net are in contact among themselves and exchange concepts, propositions, projects, and other forms of articulation. The idea of net is not new, and in this moment it stops to be an authorized idea. Net can be arbitrarily developed and copied. So it was an important, in my opinion, attempt to establish this way of thinking about art, where you don't have this direction or this linear situation, but to establish a structure which is more like horizontal, a structure which has no coordinates, clear coordinates, and a structure in which contact movements go in very different directions, sometimes backwards as well. So it was a kind of open platform to share the ideas and to spread the ideas, artistic ideas, among the artists. Then just to quote one more recollection of Kozłowski, net aimed to cross not only geographical, ideological, and political boundaries, but also those set by artists, which were in a sense breached by the conceptual revolt. All isms, arts, and other divides became irrelevant. It was all about art in its great diversity. Utterly different articulations, attitudes, and underlying ideas. A breeding ground for artistic friendship, which were arguably the most important value of the net. It was immensely. Interestingly, Kozłowski, who was with Kostołowski, the heart of this project, received the same year, so 1972, received a letter, from the artist Barry McCallum from United States, who asked Kostolowski and Kozłowski to put him on the list of this network, to be part of the project. And interestingly, on the backside of this letter, he sketched this diagram, this drawing, he made this drawing, where you can see this very complex and very multi-layered system of connections, of meeting points, of coming together, but also being outside. So it's like a very complex network. And this complex network was also a substantial part of thinking in 20s and 30s about how to produce art, how to present art, how to establish art. Like not through the prism of very individuals, very big names. We of course know Gropius, we know Le Corbusier, we know a few other big names. But there was also another way of, or another attitude towards producing art and making art, which was a kind of group and cooperation, cooperative attitude, which was rooted in connections, which was rooted in mutual exchange, and which was rooted also in being in touch with each other, not only through professional letters or professional focusing on professional interests, but also being like a private person connected to other people. As Timothy Benson and Eva Fogacz mentioned, a big role was, or the focus and important role was shifted towards periodicals, magazines issued by different avant-garde groups across Europe and also beyond. And both authors mentioned that the small magazines often publish excerpts from one another as well as promoted one another in advertisements. Written and read at cafe tables and in atelier, a daily exchange among artists of different regions, these publications are an essential part of the historic fabric. And this idea of internationalization was also supported not only by text but also by photographs, which were exchanged between artists. And one of the important examples for this kind of flux of images and using images as a tool of like building a common idea of art and presenting idea of art was a book published by Katarzyna Kobra and Władysław Strzemiński, both artists who were important protagonists of avant-garde milieu in Poland. Katarzyna Kobra was actually Russian German heritage, and she was born in Russian Empire back then. And she studied at Moscow School of Painting and Sculpture and Architecture, but then it shifted to second Free State workshops. Strzemiński studied at the first state-free workshops or art studios. They moved to Smolensk. Anya will also refer to this. But beginning of 20s, they moved to Poland. Strzemiński was born in Minsk, but he was born in Polish family. So you see that the roots and the identity is already very, very complex in those situations. So they moved to Poland. They started to create, establish, and organize the avant-garde milieu in Poland. They became co-members. They became members, but also they were involved in organizing avant-garde groups, at the beginning Block, then Presence, and then AR. And 1941, they were also involved in establishing collection of modern art, which is a very unique idea back then. It was an idea which was initiated and conducted by artists, and relied also on direct contact between artists. So these were like gifts from other artists to artists in order to establish a modern art collection in a worker and factory city, Łódź, in Poland in late 20s. So we have those two figures, and they published in 1931. They published a book, Kompozycja przestrzeni, obliczenia rytmu czasu przestrzennego, so composing space, calculation of space-time rhythm, which was a try to show, to present the idea of modern sculpture and development or changes in modern sculpture, and to also establish the idea of sculpture as a space composition, which was the core of Katarzyna Skowron's idea about the sculpture. And you can see that the part of the book, very substantial part of the book, was devoted to images of works which were very recent, which were very new. Of course, Katarzyna Skowron's works, but also by other artists like Georges Van Tongeren. With him, they had both a very close contact also on this very personal level. Yes, and it was not unique, of course, but because we have other examples like Lisicki and Hans art, the Kunstismen, but as Strzemiński stressed and underlined in his correspondence with Julian Przyboś, who was a poet, avant-garde poet, a member of a art group. For Kobro and Strzemiński, the visual part of the book, so the illustrations, were considered as very crucial, and the images were either sent by other artists or they were made with very much effort by the authors of the book. So it was necessary to be in contact to get the images from other artists in order to publish this book. And you can see here also this reproduction from the Kunstismen, that we have the same reproduction of the work that we have seen in the book by Kobro and Strzemiński here at the bottom. Do we have a pointer actually? No. Oh, sure. So I put this work and I'll go back. It's here. So we have circulation of the same images, which are supposed maybe also to enforce, to make stronger the presence of some images in the visual imagination of the time. Yeah, so that's this private part of history between Kobro, Strzemiński and Van Tongeren, because this picture was sent by Kobro and Strzemiński from their holiday, summer holiday in Chałupy in Poland, very nice place. And it was on the backside, it was written, yes, greetings from Chałupy, yes, and some basic stuff, but very private ones, not connected to art or something. And this image is actually at Georges Van Tongeren's archive available. Yes, and we have also other direction. We have also a situation when some of the pictures or images made by presenting works by Polish artists or artists based in Poland have been sent abroad. We have Moderne Plastik, Elemente der Wirklichkeit, Masse und Auflockerung by Karola Gideon-Welker. And Karola Gideon-Welker decided to present a work by Katarzyna Skowron, here at the very bottom, juxtaposed with this astonishing and brilliant image of Greg Palooka in the midst of the jump. So this connection also between artificial form and natural form is very interesting in this case. And of course we have the periodicals and magazines. As I said before, Kobro and Strzemiński were part of the groups, like Blog for example, and in Blog you have plenty of excerpts of the articles, for example, text by Theo van der Spoork or Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, also presenting works by other artists, Cornelis van Esteren. For example, here you have here a small excerpt from Mies van der Rohe's texts. Here, information towards not Polish-speaking colleagues. Please send us your images of your newest work. We are more happy to get them, to receive them, and to publish them. Here's some more examples, like Kazimierz Malewicz here, Theo van der Spoork. but also, yes, Presence, which was the magazine published by a group which followed the blog group. The blog group was the first one, and then Presence came up. But we also have situation and examples of like sending the images abroad, and here you can see, for example, some images or some screenshots showing parts of Nelly and Theo van der Broek collection, where there's a lot of pictures also presenting works of Polish artists and by Polish artists, and some of the images are not known in Poland. So it's also interesting from this art historical perspective. Strzemiński work here, and here is Kobro. Example from France, Abstraction Création, the magazine where also Kobro's works were presented. And Manifest Imaginaiste, and Kobro was one of the artists who signed this manifest. And coming already to the end of my part, just a small appendix to this, because what we have seen till now, there were connections within Europe, but there are also examples which show that not necessarily these connections were between countries or artists in Europe. Sometimes the map, this moved or shifting map, goes beyond the countries or points which can be considered as central for thinking about avant-garde, and connects unexpected parts of the world. And here I start with Alfred Düntuch, who was an architect based in Krakow. He was educated at Lviv Polytechnic in 20s, and then he moved to Krakow. He established an architectural office together with Stefan Landsberger, and they were both also Jewish descent, and were mostly known for prominent tenement houses in Krakow. More luxurious, more like devoted or focused on details, also introducing interesting way of thinking about shaping space, light experience, light and shade experience inside, with very sophisticated details also, color juxtapositions, material juxtapositions. But what happened with Düntuch here's one more example. But what happened with him in 1939? He had to escape, he had to leave Poland, he had to emigrate. And he emigrated towards Brazil, towards Sao Paulo. In the 40s, he was active at the beginning as a collaborator, as a person who was an architect who worked for a very known architectural company in Sao Paulo. But late 40s, he established or re-established the company that he had before the war. So the company that he had with Landsberger, who also emigrated to Sao Paulo. And they were very successful. They were very well known. They were very well established in the Sao Paulo architectural milieu. And you can see some examples of the buildings that they built designed in Sao Paulo. So we can see some we can see the connections and what we can, or how we can think about modernism, how we can think about transmitting or transporting some ideas. Sometimes can be understood from the point of view not going through something which is considered a center, but sometimes can be considered like skipping the center and going in totally different directions and taking totally different paths. One more picture from the inside of the building, and just as a secondary remark, the daughter of Alfred Düntuch Olga Dutur. She was one of the first female architects in Sao Paulo, but she was also chief editor of the first interior design magazine in Brazil back then. And she was very successful also in this part of her professional life. Okay, I will go maybe just to wrap up my part and to give the floor also to Anna. I think it's interesting to like, open up the research on avant-garde and also to open up the field of research in art history on the concept of interconnections, concept of migrations of forms, ideas, things, people as well. And maybe it's worth to look into the research fields, which, for example, Kulturkreisforschung, where we have more complex dynamics presented, where we can skip this linear relationship between center and periphery, and we can see this relationship as a more like multi-layered. We can see this relationship as something where not only what had been received is important, but also what was skipped, what was rejected, and what was changed is equally important as well. Okay, so that's for my part. Thank you very much, and I will give the floor to Anna.
Thanks a lot, Małgorzata. So I would probably start with a little bit of contextualization of my own practice as well, because I mean I need to explain why the topic of avant-garde has become a kind of I don't know, some topic of my life, because I came from Belarus, and it's the country where Unovis, I'm pretty sure that you know about this affirmers of new art. So Unovis was established in Vitebsk in 1919, and here you see the original building where this artistic movement which framed and defined the development of avant-garde art, not only in so-called eastern part of Europe, but globally, I would say, because Lisicki, who started also in Unovis, then shifted to Germany, and then had the close connections with Bauhaus as well. This building still exists in Belarus, and it has become also an object of propaganda for many years, because they did the restoration of this building. And originally this building is located on the street in Vitebsk with the title Pravdy 5, or The Truth 5. I mean the same title as the very famous newspaper during Soviet time. And when Lukashenko opened in 2017 this building as the so-called, let us say, Museum of Unovis, they renamed the street into the street of Marc Chagall, because the street, I mean, Chagall in fact had, I would be very careful with the definitions, but still I will affirm that Chagall had very little common with Unovis, and he was among the establisher of Vitebsk Art School, but definitely Unovis was mostly connected with the name of Malevich, but not Chagall. But for authorities, the names of Malevich is definitely not the very convenient one, and is still treated like a dangerous one. That's the, I mean, that was the starting point of my interest, because Vitebsk and also this Belarusian part of avant-garde European history has never usually mentioned in the, I don't know, the big European conferences, neither in the big museum shows and so on. I would like maybe to very quickly skipped because I just sorry, I need to show you this slide, because it was one of the first exhibition that was organized, as you see, in 1992 in Guggenheim Museum. It was the very weird title from my point of view because it divides the avant-garde movement into Russian and Soviet avant-garde, which is really surprising for me. What does it mean, first of all, to have Russian avant-garde, and then what does it mean Soviet avant-garde? So, but you see also, you know, the map of the agents of avant-garde referential to the Western audience. So with whom? It's the State Classical Gallery, it's the Russian Museum in St. Petersburg, and Kunsthalle in Frankfurt, and Salomon Guggenheim Museum. So it's one of the first big exhibition of avant-garde. And it's not occasional, because I mean the first time when I also saw the works of Władysław Strumiński was Documenta 14. I mean, it's very shame on me, but it was so. I mean, I started my curatorial practice 10 years ago, like professionally, and we have never heard about Władysław Strumiński in Belarusian context, in spite of the fact that he was born in Minsk. He was baptized in Minsk. He originally, as the very important figure of the international avant-garde movement, he has the father with Russian roots, and his father belonged to the very noble military, let us say, noble military groups in Russian Empire. But his mother originally had the roots from the very famous, I would say, Belarusian Polish family with the surname of Aliszkiewicz, and they are originally from this western part of Belarus, which is close to Grodno. So Documenta 14 was the show curated by Polish curator Adam Jędrzejczyk, and he presented one of the mystic piece of Strumiński, and that was the first time when I saw, okay, so born in Minsk, but we have nothing about Strumiński in Minsk. So we had no one of his paintings, no graphics. We also, then I started to research and I found some publications in press. But why I'm telling all of this, because his life was pretty much connected also with Belarusian territories, because he taught in Vileka, and it's also the western part of Belarus, and he left for Poland with Cobra, but then from time to time they are moving, I don't know, they're moving between Vilnius and Vileka and Łódź and Warsaw. Why I'm telling also all of that? Because, I mean, Unavis in Vitebsk, which within the Russian Empire was the very provincial city. And the reason, for example, why Malevich found himself in Vitebsk was because in 1919, yes, he was invited by Lisinsky, but in 1919, 2 years after October Revolution in Russian Empire, there was simply lack of food in St. Petersburg, and Malevich was very happy to find himself in Vitebsk, because that was the city where you could find a white bread in the market, and where he could provide also his young family, and also his daughter was born in Vitebsk. This is the very important, from my point of view, also illustration to prove that not only visual nature and the visual part of avant-garde movement was important, but discursive part, framed and precised the treatment of avant-garde movement, because how the artists, and I would say that most of them would be also named as art theoreticians, because Malevich and Strumiński wrote a lot about the history of art, how we defined art, what is the purpose of artistic practice in connection with the social and political situation in every concrete, I don't know, time and so on. It's important. And Malevich was very happy that in Vitebsk in 1919 he received an opportunity to publish his theoretical works, and he didn't in fact created any visual works, maybe some sketches, but he wrote a lot about art. So the god, so it was the first so-called listok. I don't know how to translate it. Kind of self-made newspaper in Vitebsk, in Unavis, and this is the very famous photo of the teachers of Unavis. So you see Daria Malaeva, Lazar Hideki, this is Malevich, and yes, and that's how also, you know, R Grupa, artist revolutionary somehow, is also, I mean, Stremiński, Przybylsk, Staszewski and Kopro didn't give any precise definition what does AR means, so it could be also interpreted as artist revolutionary. And Stremiński for sure knows Malevich very well, because the first time he saw Malevich and was introduced to him was in Moscow, when Stremiński attended the drawing classes, let us say. And I completely forgot to mention that Stremiński wasn't trained as a professional artist, and when he started to practice art, it was already after his heavily trauma and heavily injured after 1916, because he was trained as a professional military person, and he started in St. Petersburg. For that time it was also like a bon ton for noble military families, and he participated in the First World War, and he lost his eye, he lost part of his leg, and he lost also part of his right arm. Can you imagine? And after that, in the hospital, he met Katarzyna Kobro, and Katarzyna Kobro introduced him that there is an opportunity to attend these artistic courses. And that's how art also appeared in the life of Stremiński. And when in 1919, Stremiński and Kobro found themselves in Smolensk, Malevich also came frequently to visit them in Smolensk from Vitebsk, because everything was very close to the city themselves. This is an interesting diagram from my point of view. I mean, we don't know the author of this diagram, but it's probably, it could be probably also made by Stremiński, because it's diagram of the spreading of art pieces in the Izo Narkompros from the 1918-1919. And from my point of view, it shows vividly that the avant-garde movement has never been linear one, because it was really the circulating of ideas and even the circulating of art objects between this, you know, exchange, not between the center and the periphery. Because in this diagram, you see, for example, so it is mentioned that the paintings is 1,336, the graphics is 500, the sculpture and space forms is also interesting how they divide them. And here are the name of the different cities within, I would say, within former Russian Empire for sure. And here you see the quantity of the objects that would belong to these cities. And here you see the real provincial cities of the Russian Empire. For example, Yelets, Vitebsk, Samara, Slobodskoye, Penza, Russian Museum, as not the city but the museum in St. Petersburg that had already existed. Shuya is really like a small city with a small population. And it's also interesting because, for example, still in Perm or in Smolensk or in Voronezh, there are still the pieces of Władysław Stremiński in the collection of these museums. And so it doesn't mean that avant-garde was established, for example, in Moscow and then spread it from the center to periphery, given the art pieces. No, the idea was really to establish the kind of, yes, international movement, but just because it should be a really large-scale movement, it should be presented in every part of empire. Why again this diagram is interesting? Because I mean, we couldn't unfortunately deny the past and the historical past of Russian Empire. And this is a tragedy for my country, for example, because I mean, we have been a part of Great Duchy Lithuania, being together with Lithuania, part of Poland, part of Ukraine, the whole territory of Belarus. In the 16th century, at least 140 of our cities adopted Magdeburg law, and in the 16th century we have already so-called Great Duchy Lithuanian Statute, so the huge law which defined and regulates the social and political life in the country. But then we have always been treated as a part of Soviet Union and now somehow part of Russia because of the Soviet past and because of the Russian language, for sure, that the country, let us say not most of the country and all country, but many people speak. And this is the map of 1919 of Riga Peaceful Treaty, if you heard about it. So this time of the before 1917, before October Revolution, and directly after October Revolution is very important. I think it's very similar time of what we have nowadays, because it's the time which was full of wars, different wars. It was the Russian-Soviet War, it was the First World War, it was civil war in Russia. And the territory of Belarus has been divided 3 times within 20 years. So part of the territories, especially the western one, so I would say, so this is the western Belarus, and this is mostly this territory, so this is Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and this is Vilnius, the capital of contemporary Lithuania. But these parts, as you see, and this is Lviv in Ukraine, this part after Riga Peace Treaty has been a part of Poland, because it was the agreement between Poland and Soviet Union to stop the Soviet-Polish War. And that's also how, for example, Struminsky was totally okay to be in Vileka. It's a small, it's even really like a village, really small town in Belarus, but in the western part, very close to Vilnius. And Katarzyna Kabro and Struminsky lived in Vileka for almost a year, and they taught art in the school of Henryk Sienkiewicz. And after that, in 1923, Struminsky and Lithuanian artist Karlukštis, they organized the first exhibition of Polish contemporary art in Vilnius. And Vilnius, which is now treated as the totally not treated, but it's the Lithuanian capital, and it's Lithuanian city. But the population of Vilnius before 1939 was mostly Jewish, Belarusian, Polish population. So there was really very little, I don't know, the notion of Lithuanian population. It was like different groups of people. Also very important to keep in mind when we are talking about modernism as the project of modernism in connection with the project of nations. Kabro, for example, left Vilnius because it was very uncomfortable for her in 1923 to be there because most of the people speak Polish language in Vilnius. So interesting, yeah, that Russian Empire, then the division of the territories, and then I mean, when the big museums organize the exhibition and show the works of Malevich or Chagall, it's always Russian avant-garde artist, or I don't know, Jewish Russian artist, but never, you know, referring to the real, not the real, but okay, but never contextualization of this discourse. these borders and these maps, geopolitical and national, they were very fluid, and I think it's very important to keep in mind when we name avant-garde with any national adjectives. I don't know, Russian, Polish, Belarusian, Ukrainian, or something like that. Just to show that this also, as Małgorzata mentioned, this intense exchange of ideas was very important and was very vivid and based not on the institutional exchange and not on the vertical exchange from center to periphery, but it was first of all the connection between people. It's Lubomir Micic, one of the main figures of Serbian avant-garde, and he was a poet and also a writer and an artist, and he established the magazine called Zenith. And it was practically the same year with blog, with Presence, that was active in Łódź. And that's also interesting how the importance and the role that the written word played in the whole movement. It was not accidental, because the new Soviet state, from the very beginning, also established, this huge machine of propaganda. It was something that supported this very big, huge system. And art, avant-garde art. It's hard to say who appropriated this mechanism, because my assumption is that that was like the mutual process, that the Soviet propaganda then also saw how intensive publications and the magazines and the books from the artists' works, how influential they were, and they really adopted it, because really these repressions against avant-garde movement started in the Soviet times, like 2 years after the October Revolution, because in 1920 Izona Campros lost I would say the artists lost the power to define the politics of Izon Arkampros, and Izon Arkampros has become just the part of the whole cultural, ideological system within the Soviet machine. But it was just a couple of years. And this is the collection, the international collection of art that was established and presented in Muzeum Sztuki in Łódź in 1932. And that's the unique collection because it is made 100% from the donations. So Strumiński, Staszewski, Kobro, and Julian Przybors, as the initiators of AR Group, they developed with the help of Jan Brzękowski and Nadia Hadasiewicz-Leger, they developed an intensive contact with Western European artists. That's how the works of Mondrian and Theo van Doesburg appeared also in Łódź. And it was the donations. It was totally different model of exchange and of establishing collection, not based on power and money, but based on the common values. And I put Nadezhda Wanda Hadasiewicz-Grabowska in this presentation because I think she's a great example and a kind of symbol and metaphor of avant-garde movement because of her also belongings and let us say national identity. She was born in the small village in Belarus, and she wanted to leave Belarus for better life because she really wanted to study art. But she has already heard about Unavis and visits, but she decided not to go to visits. She decided to go to Warsaw because, I mean, she was very clever in her choice. And in Warsaw she married Stanisław Grabowski, and that's how she became Wanda Grabowska. Started to try her, let us say, Polish identity, and she attended Warsaw State Academy of Arts, so that's how she started her, I would say, artistic practice. But then with Grabowski she moved to France. And I mean, the relationship with Grabowski was very abusive and so on and so forth. But in France, she met also with Gendrik Staszewski and with Jan Brzękowski. And with Jan Brzękowski, she was responsible also for the publication and for the work with this magazine L'Art Contemporain. And she played a crucial role, in fact, in also, I would say, management for Strzelecki collections. So she's a little bit a hidden part also for this Strzelecki history, because in his letters to Julian Przybors, he mentioned that he didn't really like Nadia Grabowska-Leger because, I mean, she's so impulsive and so on. But she made a huge work just because she also had an access to all these artists, thanks to the access to Ferdinand Leger for sure. But I mean, it's always some personal idea. Yeah, here is this just quote that she was really impressed to meet Strzelecki, and yeah. So the last probably I would like to say is a little bit about how art is seen as the agent of modernization, and I mean, here I'm referring to the quote from the letters of Strzelecki to Julian Przybors. So it's not enough to create a work of art. One must also create the right environment for it to have an impact. I mean, quite often, and especially nowadays, I think that you also one interview. Oh God, I forgot the name of this famous artist, but so. Sometimes people are waiting the revolutionary gestures from art to change the world, I don't know, to change the political situation, the social situation and so on. But, and it makes sense from on the one hand, because, I mean, that everything started, let us say, from the avant-garde movement, which really has this mood of changes and which really has this this implementation of the changes into social and political context, and also, I mean, this is the practical tools of art. This is how, for example, I don't know, kindergarten was created from the design of Kobro. I mean, the implementation of art into architecture and so on and so forth. But in fact, this tension and this dialogue between social political environment and art itself is very complex, and it's also could be probably the answer that we are asked every time, why you didn't manage to change your political situation in the country in comparison with Ukraine, who went to Maidan and changed the situation. And I try to explain that, you know, if you have, I don't know, 4 militarians for 1 Belarusian, it's a little bit difficult to change the situation, and you have Kremlin also near you and by your side. And so this idea of affirmation of the new art, yes, it plays an important role, not to make art elitarian or egalitarian towards the audience, but so it's the quote from the Polish researcher based in Łódź, Tomasz Załuski. very like and very appreciate one of his articles with the title "Art as the Agent of Marginalization," when he proclaimed this double politics of Stravinsky, that from one hand art should affirm the publicity and the changes, but on the other hand, I mean, there could be a specific historical, social and political context for that, definitely. And it's very interesting also how within the Belarusian case it transformed, because I mean, in 2020 it was the peaceful protest after a presidential election in Minsk, and people like in 1919 in Minsk and 1920s, where Stravinsky, for example, he made the decoration of Minsk city for the anniversary of October Revolution, and that's how artists came to the public place, not showing their art within the art institutions with the closed museums, but going to the streets, painting the walls, making the slogans. And that's how, I don't know, people started, because we have the protests practically every day in different forms, but Sunday marches was the largest one, where people really put all the creative potential into that, and they started to create really a very interesting installations, slogans, I don't know, happenings, everything possible, and they occupied the streets with their, I don't know, let us say, artistic statements or something like that. So it was, for example, the call for Lukashenko that they created, and the slogans was "Look at the window, not at the TV," because if you look at the window, there were millions of people on the streets, and the TV set says, "Oh, you know, it's the Polish coordinated protest from Warsaw," because it's, I mean, for us, Poland for sure is the western part, and so on. And here I put also the example of how art occupied the public space in 1920 in Vitebsk, because it was also the October Revolution anniversary, and Malevich and his students, they painted a tram, suprematic tram. Lisicki also created the very beautiful tribune, and so on. And interesting that this book of Malevich, I forgot to translate it into English. Sorry, it's the God. I don't know what is the correct German. The God is not kicked out. So it's the book where he, for the first time, proclaimed also the idea of black square, and that art in its development is eagerring to a certain calm down and the emptiness, like the final point. So art, church, and not fabrics, but factories, yes. This book came to Belarus in 2020 because it returned to Vitebsk, where it was published by Malevich. And it returned to Vitebsk thanks to the crowdfunding, where people donated lots of money, but the main sum was donated by Belgazprom. And Belgazprom is the bank which was established almost 30 years ago, one of the first private bank in Belarus, with a very weird history because it is connected with Russian Gazprom. But the director of the bank was one of the presidential candidates, Viktor Babarika. So now he is in prison for 25 years. But you know how this politics and the politics of art is connected still with the publicity, and yeah. And in fact, the term avant-garde has never been as mentioned I don't know, Balbocenka, Malevich, as they never mentioned themselves as avant-garde artists. Neither Stravinsky never mentioned himself, the title, or I don't know, named himself as avant-garde Russian or Polish or somebody else artist. It was Alexander Benoit who wrote in 1918 the review to the avant-garde exhibition, and he just set the triangulation, naming artists centrist, avant-garde, and avant-garde. And I mean, for decades, this term somehow disappeared, in fact, from the art historian discourse. But then it appeared and was really carefully developed by Russian Soviet art historiography. And this is Russian oligarch, businessman with the name Piotr Agen, and this man possesses one of the largest private collections of avant-garde art in the world. And his collection is about, I guess, 3 or 4, maybe not 4, 3 billion euros, and consists of like more than two. No, I will not count the precise quantity, but it's really the largest collection. He started to collect it in the late 80s, and I mean, this is also why this term Russian avant-garde is circulating all over the world, because who possesses the art pieces, they define the definitions, they define the language somehow also for what we describe as avant-garde, as Russian, Soviet, or there are avant-gardes somewhere else as well.